special meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And I'll second. Any discussion? None. All in favor?
Aye.
Roll
Aye.
call. Allison.
Thank you. Member Dickinson?
Can't hear you, Allison.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. Member Dickinson?
Yes.
Vice Chair Brown?
Yes.
Member Good?
Yes.
Member Hughes?
Yes.
Member Armstrong?
I was not present, but I've read them. Yes.
Thank you. And Member Knight?
Yes.
We have 6 in favor. The motion passes.
Thank you. Item number 6, CYMPO Administrative Report. Benny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. It's good to be at the my first executive board meeting with CYMPO as the administrator. I thank you for welcoming me all. I think I've had the privilege now of meeting with you all individually one-on-one, and I appreciate your time and look forward to working with you and for you. So just a couple items. We do have a full agenda today. Due to some previous committed meetings and such, I do have something at 4:30, so I did hopefully create the agenda that if I slip out, everything should be okay. Daniel has the last few items, and I am teaching for ASU, and I have a class that starts at 4:30, but hopefully we should be far enough along that you'll be okay without me. And then the other item is there has been an adjustment to how we're able to collect in-kind time. Up till now, we've been able to track in-kind time of your staff, and we've documented that for our local match. We've recently received approval to be able to utilize it for elected officials, which is you as the executive board. That's a very much of a positive thing. Excuse me. When we look at our budget and how the federal funds that we receive and the match requirement with that, we do a very good job in tracking again your staff time, maybe through the TAC or through various meetings. And at this point, receiving approval from Federal Highway Administration and ADOT, allowing us to now utilize your time is an additional benefit to the area. So with that said, the way that it works for your TAC, and you can talk with each of your representatives because they're familiar with this process. Allison prepares what looks like a timesheet, if you will, monthly, and she sends it out to each of the TAC members. She will now do that for you as an executive board. She does the best she can to estimate the time that you put towards CYMPO activities, primarily based upon meetings. Again, she's not completely familiar if you're doing any additional meetings related to CYMPO or additional work on behalf of CYMPO. So she will try and put her best guess to the time each month. She is looking to have your signature. You're more than welcome to modify that timesheet if you feel that the time is not accurate in some way. So by all means, adjust the time she puts down. You can make it less or more, but we are looking to receive a signature on that for you. And again, ultimately that's documented for the local match. That's the only announcement I have. The rest of my comments will be for other agenda items, but happy to take any questions or comments on what I covered.
Well, according to the minutes, Vinny, we're supposed to also be talking about, we're on item number 7, or we're moving on to item number 7. So have you been able to review all of the things on the MTIPs for the subsequent fiscal years?
I have. I've definitely, sir, I believe this is what are we on, day 7 or day 8? So I hit the ground running. I believe I'm up to speed with the TAC. We were able to have 2 TAC meetings last week. One was a working meeting with me, and one was a regularly scheduled meeting. So I've definitely spent quite a bit of time with your technical representative, and I believe I'm up to speed as best I can.
Okay, well, why don't we move on then, since you're done with the administrator report, move on to item number 7, because a lot of these things I don't think everybody's up to snuff on. So
Okay.
item number 7.
Happy to do that, sir. Mr. Chair, members of the board. So just to clarify, this first item, if you will, item number 7 is an amendment to our existing work program and our existing tip. And I don't want to confuse that with items number 8 and 9, because those are talking about the new work program and the new tip we're working on. So we do need to amend some items in our existing work program and our existing tip. And I'm happy to now go into that. So let me start with the work program. In your packets, prior to the amendment, I provided some additional information for you related to a program. It's called HSIP. We use a lot of acronyms, so I'll try and be mindful of that, but it's the Highway Safety Improvement Program. And what that program is I put in some additional information in your packet, and then I'll explain the amendment. We want to take advantage of this particular program. This program provides, on a competitive basis, safety funds for our region. In previous years, these were monies that were given directly to us, but ADOT changed the process to make them competitive a few years ago. And in doing so, we're coming to you today with the tax recommendation. We want to be an active participant in that competitive process. So I've been working with the TAC to go ahead and identify some funds to bring on a consultant to help us. What you have in your packet on the next page, Daniel, if you'd go to the next page, is the timeline. This is the HSIP and crash data analysis timeline. We're looking at from present time all the way to November 1st is when we're going to submit an application. We've identified about $20,000 that we would need to have a consultant help staff out and the technical committee. What they would be doing is 2 things on behalf of our region. Is they're going to be doing crash data analysis from the last 5 years, and they're going to be helping to identify safety projects in the region. This program will allow us to put applications forward to compete for these safety dollars. My experience from Lake Havasu MPO the last couple years was, we end up spending about $20,000 and we're able to bring in anywhere from $500,000 to over $1 million per project, depending on what it is. My experience has been with traffic signals, pedestrian signals, rumble strips, safety, paint on the ground, if you will, for bicycle pathways, things like that. I'm not saying that's necessarily for this region, but we will move forward with this with your support to do that. And I'm going to explain that a little further in this amendment. The next couple pages are part of the notice, just for your information on the request for quotes. You as a board have approved an on-call list of consultants, which is really a very good thing. We didn't have this in Havasu, and we had to go through a much lengthier process. By having an approved on-call list, some of that procurement process is more streamlined here, and I'm very grateful to inherit that. What you have in this packet, though, is the request for quotes that we're going to go ahead and put out for a consultant to help us out with those things that I just talked about. And again, what they're doing is crash data analysis, and they're also preparing the HSIP applications. So that's a little bit of background. Now let me get into the specifics of the amendment. Daniel, if you'd go to the cover page of the amendment. So again, this is going to be for fiscal years 20 and 21. This is already an approved work program, so we are needing to do an amendment. We've attempted to highlight in yellow what it is we're amending. Forgive us if we've missed something, but I think we've double checked it. So on page 7, is the first place for the amendment. Having a new administrator, we had to change, you passed it, Daniel. Having changed from Chris to myself, we needed to amend his name to my name. Next page is page 8, which is again the organization chart, changing Chris's name. Page 10 is the next place for changes. The executive board, we had to go through and make quite a few changes with welcoming many new executive board members. So we added Councilman Good to it. And as Supervisor Brown said, on the next agenda, we will go ahead and put on the Secretary Treasurer action item. We've added Councilman Armstrong from Chino Valley. And then we've indicated, as I said earlier, Gary Knight as the state representative on the executive board. So we needed to make those changes. And then on the TAC level, I believe there's 2 modifications there is John Hughes, Mayor Hughes is also needing to wear multiple hats as they're lacking staff in Dewey Humboldt's current situation. So he is filling in on the TAC. And then we have a new ADOT planner, which is Myrna Bondock, and she's been indicated on there. Moving on to the next page of amendments, page 12. You have highlighted in yellow $125,442. This dollar amount, when we begin the year, is an estimated number for this, and ADOT has recently given us the no longer estimated number, but the accurate number. The accurate number was and is $639 less than their initial estimated number. So the number you're seeing highlighted in yellow is the number it's supposed to be. And if you go back to the original one, it would be $639 more. So that was the adjustment. That same adjustment goes on to the next 2 pages. So page 16 reflects that particular adjustment. They're just different budget tables on the next 2 pages. And then page 24, Daniel.
Wait, I can't get into it.
And then page 24 is the Highway Safety Improvement Program that I just gave you a little extra background on. What we're doing is we're adding, again, $20,000 to our existing work program in order to hire a consultant to help with what I mentioned earlier. The next page is, you have several things highlighted in yellow, and my apologies because we had yellow highlights previously in the document for our total row. So yes, you have highlighted the total number, but they actually are not changing. It was just a coincidence that we were using yellow before. So sorry for that confusion. What I do want to bring to your attention is towards that bottom section where it says plans. What is highlighted in yellow is the crash data analysis. Again, we're adding $20,000 specifically for this program. We're taking it from the on-call road planning assessment. So that's at a changed dollar amount. And then I'm going to explain the other adjustment that we have. And what should be highlighted in yellow is where the cursor is, and they're highlighting it kind of for you, is this payback to ADOT for OA adjustment. So this payback is, and I'm going to explain it on the next page, if you don't mind going to the next page, but that should have been highlighted in yellow. So this is part of the amendment. This is the TIP amendment. And I think this illustration, I believe, if I've confused you, should hopefully clarify the confusion. So we currently have $75,000 programmed for that thing that is highlighted in red. And that is to further study the 89A eastbound dual on-ramps. This was an evaluation, a planning effort to go ahead and look at this project, $75,000 there. What has come up since my return to CYMPO is in trying to reconcile our finances with what ADOT has, with what we have. We are short of some dollars here, and we're short about $55,000 to make everything balance out. In order to do that, and what that's coming out of is, it's a difference between what we were apportioned and what is our obligation authority. And we programmed on some things an apportionment, and that's why we're coming up short on the $55,000. So to make everything balance, to make it right, we went searching for the $55,000, and the best place to pull it out of for now is that project that's identified in red. So to take $55,000 out of that $75,000 for the, it's listed as alternative selection report for 89 and 89A eastbound dual on-ramps. We're gonna propose to pull it out of there. It leaves $20,000, which the numbers worked out because we need $20,000 to do the HSIP project. So we're putting the 89A, 89 project on hold until fiscal year 22, which is only a few months away. And we're going to utilize that money for what's on this sheet. And it's going to go to two places. It's going to go to pay back ADOT, and it's going to be for the HSIP project. So those are the amendments I have. Sorry for all the extra details, but I was hoping they would help. Happy to answer any questions or comments you have.
Question, Vinny.
Any questions?
So if I understand this correctly, you're taking this planning process for 89 and 89A eastbound, pushing it into next year's fiscal year, starting July 1. I'd be willing to support that since it's going to primarily affect Prescott and the all the additional vehicles going both north and southbound, primarily from the airport and Deepwell Ranch development. As long as we can move that into a priority position for next fiscal year, because I've been considering this since I was on Planning and Zoning Commission 5 years ago. So nothing much has been done other than it just shows up as a planning option. And I consider this quite important for our area. So can we have a agreement that it becomes a priority for the next fiscal year?
I think, Phil, what you're saying is absolutely correct. And this has been a long planned on approach to moving forward with that intersection.
Right.
Our problem was we couldn't get ADOT to fund it, even though we were willing to move forward with the planning portion of it. So I would, from what you're saying, I'm assuming that you are making a motion to approve the amendment to the fiscal year 2021 Unified Planning Work Program, UPWP, and fiscal year 2024 Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program, MTIP, with noted changes, correct?
Correct. That would be the amendment for this fiscal year. So do I make another motion to move this to a priority in the next fiscal year, or do we wait until we look at that budget?
No, we would take care of that in the next meeting.
All right, then, yeah, I'll make the motion that you read my mind about.
Okay. I have a second.
I'll second it.
Is that Gary?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Gary. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
We need to have a roll call, unfortunately, because that's the way it was put in the agenda.
Thank you, Member Dickinson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Brown,
Yes.
Member Good,
Yes.
Member Hughes,
Yes.
Member Armstrong,
Yes.
Member Knight.
Aye.
6 in favor, the motion passes.
Great, thank you. So we'll be looking forward to that, Vinny, getting it back in there, okay?
Mr. Chair, and yes, Member Good also, I'll hit on that in the next agenda items, but yes, it is a priority for sure, and I can talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes.
All right, give me a second here. Making a lot of copious notes on this. Okay, with that, we'll move on to item 8, which is review and discussion and possible action to approve the posting of the fiscal year 2022-23 draft Unified Planning Work Program. That's the UPWP for public comment. Vinny, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. So now that you have approved the amendments of our existing work program, we're now looking to a brand new work program. The brand new work program is the comprehensive required document of the MPO. It is required of all MPOs in the United States by the Federal Highway Administration and the Federal Transit Administration through ADOT that we have this document. This document is a comprehensive document of all activities that CYMPO is involved in. It provides both a narrative and a budget associated with that. On the cover page, if you'd go to the cover page of it, Daniel, please. You'll see that this is going to cover 2 fiscal years. This is fiscal years 22 and 23. You will see that we have in yellow tentatively highlighted what we're trying to achieve is that this would come back to you for final approval at your May 19th meeting. So today is the draft that we're presenting with you, along with the support of the TAC recommendation onto you to go out to public comment. So I will go through this document. It is rather thick. So what my hope and my intent is to highlight some areas for you. Happy to take any questions or comments at the end. On page number 2, we did highlight again this program moving forward that I do think is going to be very positive for us as a region for additional dollars. So we are including in future years, I know we just amended our current one, but in future years, again, we want to take full advantage of this HSIP program that I mentioned earlier. On page 4, I'm not going to read in great detail. Oops,
I got to interrupt you here. Now, what we're looking at is a new tip moving forward for 22. And where would we find this 8989A project listed in here? Because I can't find it.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and cover that, sir, in the tip, in the next tip, the next agenda item.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So looking at, again, the vision, the mission, and the introductions, again, especially to our new executive board members who we welcome, this gives hopefully some good additional reading material on what we've been doing, on who we are as an organization, and the executive board that you're serving on. On page 6 is the map of essentially our Quad City area, including Yavapai County, Prescott Valley, Dewey, Humboldt, and Chino Valley. On page 7, we've identified, again, staffing roles and responsibilities. We've identified who our staff is. Page 8 shows the organization chart and the various committees that make up CYMPO, which you as the executive board are identified there, and then the technical committee, followed by the EMAC committee, which is the Ecosystem Connectivity and Mitigation Advisory Committee. And in a few pages, we'll see who those people are. Page 10, as you've seen already, is again you as an executive board, and then who your representatives are respectfully as a TAC. So we have that identified. On page 11 is that EMAC committee that I mentioned earlier. They do meet throughout the year quarterly. And again, we'll continue to meet. I believe their next meeting coming up is April the 26th. The second half of this page is our operational procedures and bylaws. So all the things that give the MPO the authority and the establishment is what is that part. The next page, on page 12, again, we really do, as staff goes on, we throw a lot of acronyms out. I try and be mindful of the public and maybe those that aren't as familiar. But I would always encourage anyone that wants to refer back to this document, because we do receive various types of funding. And this document gives a little more information in case you're curious whenever we say like STBG or SPR. And again, this will tell you what those particular types of funding are. What is highlighted in yellow is something new this year. So we're adding a new acronym to all the other ones we have, and it's called CPG. And what it is Consolidated Planning Grant Funds. What the approval that we've received from the feds and the state is we can now consolidate 2 previous types of funding into one. And what it is, it's going to be the PL funding, which is Metropolitan Planning Funds, and the 5305D or Federal Transit Administration Planning Funds. We can now combine those two. The simple version of this is it's a lower match when you combine the two, is what we're now eligible to be able to do. So it benefits the region. It allows us a little more flexibility, and in turn, we get to pay a little bit lower match. Daniel, if you go to the next page, this is a good visual of the different types of funding that we receive every year. So I'll just use fiscal year 22 as an example. So again, you'll see this consolidated planning grant is the first column. The second one is our SPR funding, and then STVG. That top row, $202,021, is what we're apportioned. And then the obligation authority is what we're allowed to program. And again, depending on the year, throughout the year, these requirements and the numbers as far as the obligation authority may get adjusted. But from a conservative planning and programming approach, and the approach that we're taking for this work program is we are going to program the obligation authority. Again, that's the more conservative approach. At the end of the year, if the Federal Highway Administration and ADOT says, okay, you're allowed to go into some of that apportionment, we'll go ahead and make those adjustments with your approval and the technical committee's input. But for now, what we will be programming again is that obligation authority. So as you look at it, you look at the CPG, that's $191,718. SPR is $118,625, and STBG is $649,254. And my screen is being covered up by your faces, so let me move that over. So that is a total of $959,597,000 that we will program. Now, the match that's listed on there, this again is the responsibility of each of our local agencies that are represented here. So that $61,120 is the match requirement in order for us to fully access that $959,000. The match is divided up between each of your respective areas based upon population. So between Prescott Valley, Dewey, Humboldt, Chino Valley, and Yavapai County. The way of paying the match, and excuse me for going a little bit more detailed, but I want to really bring our new board members on the same page altogether. That match is paid of one of two ways. It's paid by either a hard match, which would be each of the entities writing a check and it coming out of your budget, or it's paid by in-kind time. We work extremely hard as a CYMPO staff to not send any bills out to you, and we try and track all in-kind time. So again, the time of you as an executive board, the time of the technical committee, the time for any meetings that you attend on behalf of CYMPO or related to CYMPO. Office space is also in-kind tracked and documented. So long story short, that $61,121 traditionally has been paid primarily out of in-kind time. I think from time to time we have run out of in-kind and we have had to send out a bill, but I will tell you it's been extremely far and few between. And when we do, it is relatively minimal, very minimal. Going on to the next page, page 14 is our carry forward. We still have about three and a half months left of the fiscal year. So Allison is continuing to work and calculate as best she can what our carry forward balances are going to be. It's very difficult, if you will, being this far out with projects in process, certain projects on hold. So when the document comes back to you for final approval after public comment, we absolutely will have the carry forward dollar amounts. We do not have that today, again, with still a quarter to go, but we are working on that and we will fill in that information. page 15, the next page that'll be sideways on your screen, will give you an overview of where all of the monies are being programmed into the different areas. And if I can, the next several sections will better explain that. So Daniel, page 17, there's a lot of information here, so I'm definitely won't go into detail, but all this to say that in order for us as an MPO to document and be reimbursed all of the federal dollars, the activities that we do must be identified in the work program. So you do see a real comprehensive list of meetings that we're involved with, that we attend. What's required is the proposed activities and then the achieved activities, if you will. A very large section is this admin section, which again, we're a staff of 3. And you'll see all the different items that we do and we're involved with and active with, and the various meetings. At the end of each task or element, you'll see a table that breaks down the dollar amounts. I was just working with Allison this morning, and the tables are accurate, but I think to the general public, I do think they're confusing. Daniel, if you go to that first table on page 18. So with your awareness, I do want to not change the numbers at all, but I want to change the format. And I want to basically swap out, or not swap, but interchange the total and where you see MPO, because if you read it, traditionally you would look at the dollar amount and then you see like it says 119,651. And then Allison and I put a reduction of 6,430. Based upon that, you would expect to see a smaller dollar amount on the next row down. So I've asked Allison to go ahead and for all the budget tables, again, we're not changing numbers, we're just changing the way it looks. We'll go ahead and put the 126 at the top, the reduction, and then your total will actually be 119. So I just want you to be aware of that, that'll be part of your action today is we want it to be more user-friendly to the general public so they understand what we're doing in full transparency.
That'd be nice.
Page 19, for the LTAP program. LTAP's a very small program, but it does provide some dollars to some of your public works departments if they want to have a workshop to bring in some additional training. You know, I think we've done a few things in the past. An example would be like for public works, you know, for flaggers, you know, certain safety requirements, a workshop. So we can do some additional subsidize your existing programs. That's what the LTAP program is. Work element 200 is our regional planning projects. This may be of real interest to you. What we put in the work program this time, this is from the regional transportation plan. And this is our 25-year planning study, what the next 25 years looks like. In that planning document, many of you were involved with, and your technical committee and staff were involved with identifying projects for the region and putting them in a priority order. So we went ahead and put that finalized list in this document. It gives an estimated dollar amount for the project, and it gives the score is based upon that planning study. But you can look at this list and again, those of you that were on the board or maybe even as elected officials participated in this. The regional plan took well over a year, and there's just a lot of work done and a lot of accuracy to reflect the region. So we're very proud of this list, but it's also a very good reference to have in this document. Moving forward.
Question, Vinny. Can you define an adaptive signal?
I'm sorry?
Can you define an adaptive signal for me?
Yes, Mr. Chair, and I believe that was Member Good. Excuse me, I switched to my laptop, which is a smaller screen. Adaptive traffic signals, and Daniel can help me with this too, is CYMPO is doing a planning study now to evaluate the traffic signals in the region to see what the infrastructure is that we currently have, and to be able to identify how can we utilize technology to advance our existing system to be able to have a more modern traffic signals. My simple explanation is, how do we get the traffic signals to use technology, talk to each other, operate as a region better, most especially as it relates to accidents, emergencies, special events, times of day. We have to have better control as a region for these traffic signals to work together. Daniel, is there another part that I'm not familiar with on the adaptive traffic signals that you could add?
No, I think you covered it pretty well.
Councilman or Member Good, was that helpful to your question?
I think they're related to some signals that we just voted to put in on one of our high arterial streets that can identify images and trigger signal changes without having to use the embedded sensors in the pavement. Is that similar to what you're looking at?
As Mr. Chair and Member Good, as I understand it, number one, the first part of the planning effort is to evaluate what do we have currently as infrastructure. So we need to have a real strong, comprehensive understanding of all these different traffic signals. What is their current state? What do they have any technology? And if so, what is that technology? Then the second part of the plan, if you will be to see what technology is available. I think what you, as the city of Prescott, I believe, approved is absolutely an option moving forward. The study, though, is going to be able to say, what is the dollar amount, what technology, and then we'll be able to say, yes, we can advance this type of traffic signal to exactly what you said. But I guess the first step is getting an inventory, which is what's happening now. And then we will absolutely evaluate something like what you approved in Prescott.
Very good, thank you.
You're welcome, sir. Moving on past the regional project section is page 24, please, Daniel, is the crash data analysis and highway safety improvement program. So I do need to request one change here that we got clarification on. Well, you have fiscal years 22 and 23. We recently found out that the HSIP program that's presented by ADOT is going to go into alternative years. So it's going to alternate years. We're doing it this year. They're going to skip fiscal year 22. They're going to do it again in 23. And as such, what I would ask is that we go ahead and strike the fiscal year 22 budget. So there will be no HSIP program. There will be one for fiscal year 23. So I would like to, as part of your action, note that this 22 budget would be removed. Page 25, work element 300, public engagement and education. This is a real, there's many things we're very proud of, but thinking back over the years of what we've done, this education program has been incredibly successful. Back my first time with CYMPO, working with many of you on educating the public on the dangers of distracted driving, of aggressive driving, speeding. We're now entering into continuous years, and that's what you see here is the efforts that CYMPO is going to continue to do on an annual basis to get a message out through video, through social media, again, about the dangers of distracted driving. I would credit CYMPO with really making a profound statewide impact back before there was a state law. And since then, there has been laws, I know local laws enacted, but now we have a state law that prohibits, again, driving and being distracted with the cell phone. So a little background on that. Page 26, coordinated mobility management is another aspect of the MPO in that, yes, we talk a lot about roads and highways, but We also work on managing mobility through public transit, bicycle, pedestrian. We work with the agencies in the area that provide mobility services to our elderly, our disabled, veterans, low income. And in doing so, we do have certain responsibilities as an MPO to help coordinate that. What has happened prior to me coming back to CYMPO's credit is partnerships with NACOG, Northern Arizona Council of Governments. Right now, we have an agreement in place where they're doing work on our behalf, and there's a partnership in place. What I highlighted in yellow is just some of the activities that are happening in the region. We recognize, we acknowledge that Prescott Valley is moving forward with a transit system. They're utilizing some of the funds that we have in this region for the transit system. And that's what that particular section is about. Page 28, work element 500. Currently, CYMPO is in what is called an attainment area, or determine a boundary, I should say, attainment. What this is it's based upon the quality of air in our region. We continue to monitor this, and the reason why this is really noteworthy is if we were to enter into a non-attainment area, there becomes a considerable responsibility onto the MPO to then add many more requirements to all of our efforts, our planning, tracking, and so forth. An example would be like the Sun Corridor MPO or Casa Grande MPO. They are non-attainment, and they have quite a few additional requirements that staff is responsible for. So thankfully, in our situation, we remain to be in an attainment area, and we continue to track that. We look at ways of mitigating that, again, to maintain the air quality that we do have. And there are many things that we do, again through public transit, bicycle, pedestrian activities. The next section, page 30, Daniel, please, is capital expenditures. We don't have anything listed at this time. In the past has been, I believe, the vehicle and things of that nature, but we don't have any capital expenditures that we're anticipating. Page 31 is another budget table that gives an overview. What's highlighted in yellow is that carry forward amount, which we will update as time goes on, as I said, before you approve the final work program. So I've given you quite a bit. I'm now happy to take questions and comments, please.
A lot to digest, Vinny.
Yes,
I'll
sir.
say.
Do we have any questions out there, or specific questions, or this is action options we have on is to approve the postings, or we could also, I'll put it off for a meeting if you guys want to take more time to read it. So there is actually a third option. What's your pleasure?
Well, Vice Chairman Brown, I know I asked for that change of study on 89 eastbound ramp. And looking on page 21 that shows the priorities for actual construction, it's way, way, way down on the list. Given a 1.3 priority number, and that's on page 20 and 21, versus SR 69 adaptive signals at the top of the list being a 501.2 rated program. So is that subject to discussion or amendment at this time, or would we look at that as a separate further action?
Vinny, what's your thought?
Mr. Chair, member Good, good point. So what I would say is that document, again, that was where it was ranked as part of the 25-year regional transportation plan. So that plan was adopted before I arrived. My staff recommendation would be you really wouldn't be able to amend that list as it's already an approved document. But to Councilman Good's point, as far as emphasizing 89 and 89A, if you would indulge me, it's going to be covered in the next agenda item in the tip. I will illustrate where the dollars are going to be used to plan it in fiscal year 22. And then I also have something to illustrate where we actually may be able to construct it in the very near future. But that's going to be covered in the tip. And I believe the tip will show its priority for member Good if that's acceptable, if you're willing to either, if you want me to cover the tip now and then come back to this as an action item, or if you would rather do any action item for the work program. But I believe the emphasis will be seen in the next agenda item, gentlemen.
I personally think we ought to come back to it as an action item, after we go over the new tip.
Okay.
Is that all
I'll
right?
defer to your expertise, Vice Chairman Brown.
I think we're coming back. It's been a while. I don't remember exactly what everything is in the tip for next year anyway, or the year following, I should say. So why don't we do that, move forward to that and come back to item 8 and then decide what we're going to do with it moving forward. Okay?
Sounds good.
All right. Let's move on to item number 9 then.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chair, members of the board. And just a clarification too, this tip, as we're presenting it to you, I would also clarify that it really should have been more indicated as a discussion item. It's not ready for an action. We are bringing forward the spreadsheet with the numbers, but you are lacking the narrative. We will bring next month, we will bring the whole tip to you. But I did want to bring the numbers to you today, and we're talking quite a bit about it. So I do think this will help. Just know that at the end of it, there's not necessarily an action item other than any direction you want to give to me. We'll take that and make that adjustment by all means. Daniel, if you would scroll down to what's highlighted in yellow. Again, we have this HSIP program, which I've identified and I've talked about. Here is what, again, the priority that I believe Member Good is looking for, and I hope will support that, is as you scroll down between the two yellows, we have the Great Western Corridor Study Update. So we have dollars set aside for fiscal year 22, which again, I would remind everyone would start July 1st, which is a few months from now. And the other part is what's highlighted in yellow on the second part is the 89A eastbound dual entrance ramps alternative selection report. So we will go ahead and do that selection report. Again, that 75,000 that I mentioned a few minutes ago that we're placing on hold, we basically bumped it, if you will, to fiscal year 22. The TAC, along with Member Good, has done an incredible job to emphasize to me the real priority, the real importance of it. So staff, myself, and Allison and Daniel have been working really hard to make sure that this is a priority project. So we do have the funding identified for fiscal year 22. The other recommendation of TAC is that staff and TAC work to, as soon as July 1st happens, that we hit the ground running, that we don't lose any time at all. So between now and then, we are preparing a timeline with everything that we need so we don't lose any more time. So it has been it is a priority, it remains a priority. We have it in 22, which is July 1st of this year, to do the evaluation. In just a few minutes, I'm going to address the possibility of actually implementing or the actual construction. And just give me a moment to get to that. As you go through this, you then start to look at the next couple years of fiscal year 23. We're looking at further studying Highway 69 corridor from Walker Road to Fain Road. And then on to the next page, you have the 89A widening plan that is going to be continuing to be looked at. And then we have our next 25-year regional transportation plan it'll be the 2050, and that is in fiscal year 24, I believe it is. I lost my header table there. The next couple rows is, again, this is the technical committee is working on these numbers, and what they're looking at, and I wanted to bring to you today, is again, there's a real priority being emphasized to continue to look at the Great Western Corridor. Please note that these numbers remain in a very much of a draft form, a working form. For some, there's even almost a little bit of a placeholder because we're continuing discussions as to what has been studied on the Great Western Corridor, what has been studied for the Sundog Connector, what additional dollars could we put towards it to help it being put in a position on behalf of the region and being ready for the future. So we are continuing these discussions. The to be determined category, again, is a placeholder for the TAC as we try to identify what projects are a priority for the region from a planning perspective. And then finally, at the bottom of that page, you will note that we do have the passing lanes for Road 5 North out by Paulden, and then the intersection dollars from HSIP. These are from ADOT HSIP projects. The next couple pages are local projects, and that is being updated. But I do want to skip, if I can, to the end. And this is where I want to place more emphasis on that 89A area. So potential future projects, if you can get to that page, Daniel. That page right there. So in a few minutes, you have an agenda item with RTAC, which is the Regional Transportation Advocacy Council, and Kevin Adams, the executive director, is joining us. I know he's in the meeting now, and he'll be talking more shortly. CYMPO with the other MPOs and COGs, and again, RTAC represents Greater Arizona. So the way to look at it is it's all the MPOs and COGs except for MAG and PAG, or except for Phoenix and Tucson. So CYMPO is a part of RTAC, and in working through RTAC, we have an executive board, which Supervisor Brown represents CYMPO on. And then there's a management committee, which is the directors of the MPOs and COGs, which I sit on. In discussions with the management committee, and we're going to be bringing it to the executive board level at their next meeting, is Kevin has helped the directors work on a proposed legislation for next legislative cycle. We know we're in this one and we're trying to wrap it up, and we see quite a few things happening, and Kevin will talk about that today, but we see a lot of legislation for one-time projects, road projects and such, and we see the economy doing better than expected. It's hard to say where we will be a year from now, but if we're anything remotely like this situation, then what we would like to do is we would like to propose to you through RTAC to go after a one-time funding package for, again, Greater Arizona, the rural MPOs and COGs, which CYMPO is a part of that. Long story short, we would be asking for a one-time $40 million request to be divided up among the Greater Arizona MPOs and COGs. Working with my colleagues and Kevin, we've agreed upon a population distribution package. What CYMPO would receive would be a one-time funding of $4 million. What you have on your screen, this is the work of CYMPO staff and the TAC, and we've attempted to identify to be in a position to be a part of this legislation through this exact page right here. My question to the TAC was, if we had a one-time funding of $4 million, what would be the priority project? through discussions with them, number one was the Highway 69, 169 intersection improvements, which is to modify that intersection to a roundabout. The estimated dollar associated with it is about $4.3 million. So that was priority number one. ADOT shared with us at that time that they are actually pursuing funds to go ahead and take care of that project. We're positive that they have a really good chance. If that's the case, then we would move to Plan B on our list if, again, we receive this one-time funding of $4 million. That the TAC at this point is recommending to you that Plan B be a couple things, would be to actually go ahead and construct that dual lane entrance ramp, which has been talked about today, and Member Good is looking for a real priority to it. So we would look at one-time funding of that, in addition to the traffic signals that we also talked about today. So we're currently doing the planning study of the current traffic signals. This would actually be to construct much of what Member Good was mentioning that Prescott's moving forward with, to add that technology, to be to utilize current technology to advance the traffic signals. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up and say that I hope that this shows a real priority to 8989A, both in the planning and the real potential of actual construction. I guess the only asterisk to add to that is that the construction is very much dependent on our success moving forward as a statewide package. Again, we've done a lot of work with RTAC. This is a statewide package of the 10 MPOs and COGs coming together, having this document, and Kevin being able to sell it, if you will, with us to our state representatives and our leaders. So I'll be happy to take any questions or comments at this time.
This is Member Good. I'm glad to see this as a priority, and I want to make sure the other members of the executive committee aren't just thinking that I'm looking at Prescott's own interests here. The capacity and the number of enplanements at our airport is rapidly increasing. We're now the 25th busiest commercial airport in the entire United States. I know that's hard to wrap your head around, but we even passed up San Francisco International. So we've just added a new commuter flight service, Boutique Airways, that runs 2 flights a day down to Sky Harbor. And I think that's a reflection of how airline capacity is interested in getting gate access and providing more service to the airport itself. So with that added, our enplanements have gone from less than 10,000 a year to 40,000 a year, and projecting to maybe 60,000 a year. So all those people that are trying to get on a flight and are getting off flights are certainly going to be primarily moving southbound down 89, and then deciding either they go east to Prescott Valley or other locations. So having that intersection be much more capable of handling increased traffic demand is important for all of us, because Prescott Regional Airport is a regional airport. It's going to serve all of our neighboring communities, including unincorporated Yavapai County. So I think by understanding that, you realize that that's an important project. Thanks.
There's no doubt that project has been a priority for as long as I've been on CYMPO, for that last 7, 8 years. And the issue has always come up is the money, and what the priority is at the time. The 69, 169 intersection is obviously a big safety issue because of its multiple heights and everything. It's a very expensive project, and we haven't been able to get it funded, even though it's been a priority as well. The only things we've been able to get through are small projects that are usually $1 million to $1.5 million, and that's all as far as we've been able to move forward on. If in fact this year is the year where we get substantial transportation money, maybe we will be able to move forward with all of these 5 projects and get something finally accomplished, because this last year was a total loss.
Understood.
So basically, we're looking for some type of an action option. I'm ready to, I'll make a motion to approve the posting of the fiscal year 22-26 draft metropolitan transportation program for public comment with modifications that we've discussed today. Is
I'll
that okay?
second that.
Is there a second?
Yeah, second from Member Good.
Bill?
Yeah, second.
Comment? John?
No, I was just raising my hand to second you. That was okay. And if anybody doesn't think that those 2 off ramps need addressing, go over there about 7:30 in the morning and sit there for about an hour. You'll see the decisions that need to be made.
I think one of the big things that's going on is we're all sitting around waiting to see what goes on with the state, because nothing happened last year. And this coming year, we're looking at $2 billion in the, that basically are in the rainy day, moving towards the rainy day fund that the state could spend. And we're thinking that an awful lot of that money is going to obviously go to highway patrol to make up the difference in the license fees that'll be collected after July 1st. So, where is the rest of it going to go? And we're hoping a lot of it will come to rural Arizona. I know in RTAC, we've talked about this repeatedly. Nobody has a clear direction on where it's going. Even the transportation board, and I'm sure Gary would support this, we have no idea what's happening, because they couldn't make a decision up until just recently on anything, on making proposals, because nobody knew how much money we were going to have. So that's where we're at. So anyway, we got a motion and a second. All in favor, and do a roll call vote on this, okay?
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry if I can interject for a moment.
Sure.
So just to clarify, the tip, and again, I know we have it listed, staff has it listed as an action item. It's not prepared because you don't have the narrative as part of your packet. So at the next meeting, I will bring back this tip with the narrative, and then that'll be ready for an action item. And I did want to show this today because I had a feeling that Member Good and others would bring up the priority of 89 and 89A. So that's why it's in your packet. That's why we're talking about it today, but there's actually no action item for the tip. The only action item is back to the previous agenda item number 8 for the work program, sir.
Well, then, okay, then I'll withdraw my motion, and I believe Mr. Good will
Yeah,
withdraw.
I will withdraw my second.
And we'll hold that in abeyance until the next meeting.
You go.
Yeah, but we would still need you to go back to item number 8, sir, and if you could have an action item on that would be great.
Okay, and then I'll make a motion to approve the posting of the fiscal year 2022-23 draft unified planning work program for public comment.
I second that.
Seconded by John Hughes. Again, take a roll call vote, please.
Member Dickinson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Brown,
Did she say something?
Allison, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry. Vice Chair Brown,
Yes.
thank you. Member Good,
Yes,
Member Hughes,
Yes.
Member Armstrong,
yes,
Member Knight.
Yes.
6 in favor, the motion passes.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so we're moving on to item number 10, I believe, right?
Yes, sir.
Consideration possible action to appoint an alternative representative to RTAC for this coming year. Vinny.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, so this item and the next item, we have Kevin who'll give an update from RTAC, but currently Supervisor Brown is the representative for CYMPO on the RTAC executive board. We would need an alternative for those times that he's not available for someone else to attend. So at this time, again, Supervisor Brown is our rep. We need an alternative at this time from the executive board, please.
We need a volunteer.
Hey, Greg, what days are those on? Do you,
Monday.
do they,
We're doing it virtually also, John.
okay, what days?
Monday,
Monday, okay?
usually it's every other Monday or so. I think, well, I have to look at my calendar.
I think it's the third Monday.
Yeah, exactly. Third Monday.
Okay, I don't mind volunteering for the alternate.
Okay, well, is everybody okay with John taking that position? I don't
Fine with me.
say no. So John, you are the new backup president
All right, no problem.
by acclamation. Okay, moving on to our TAC report. Kevin, are you out there?
I am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
How are you doing, sir?
Doing real well. And there, yeah, as you indicated, there are a lot of questions as far as the level of revenue that's going to be directed to the infrastructure. But the good news associated with that is that it's all upwards. It's we're not concerned about losses or cuts. Seems every week there seems to be the potential for more revenue to be directed to the infrastructure, and potentially at some very dramatic levels. And so that's the positive, but give you a sort of the overview of where we are. And I think the best place to start with that is with the state legislature. And there was quite a bit of number of bills that were introduced to increase the ongoing revenue streams that feed into the infrastructure investment. And unfortunately, we haven't done so well with those bills. In fact, the only one that's remaining is Senate Bill 1108. And that's actually a tax omnibus bill, and it deals predominantly with income and property tax reforms. There is a provision in it that would establish annual fees for alternative fuel and hybrid vehicles so that their fuel sources are paying into the upkeep of the infrastructure, just like every other vehicle that's on the roads. And and we're really kind of a rider to this one. I don't think the outcome, whether that bill ultimately passes or fails, is going to be dependent whatsoever on the alt fuel vehicle fees. But if in fact it does pass, that at least puts the structure in place for these vehicles, which I think it's a good thing to do that before they become a major part of the fleet that's out there on the roads utilizing them. So, get that fee in place now as opposed to when there's widespread use of those vehicles. But as far as the other types of legislation, there was a bill to increase the fuel tax. Was going to be phased in. There were several bills that would have looked at indexing or adjusting the fuel taxes annually for inflation, and those were essentially killed when they failed to meet the first committee hearing deadline. But where I do see some significant activity for infrastructure is with the anticipated surplus that the state is trending towards receiving, roughly $2 billion. Much of that is one-time in nature, and that's there are all kinds of peculiar impacts that this last year with COVID has has essentially brought on the budget. And of course, if you remember, there are some very dramatic, dire forecasts as far as what the pandemic was going to do to revenue. And in fact, none of those have materialized. We've had, right now, we've got about 17% growth in revenue over the previous year. Now, much of that, we had a little bit of a quirk. If you remember, with the income tax filings, they got deferred out to mid-July this last year. And basically what that did was it deferred a lot of those revenue collections from the last state fiscal year into the current one. And so that provided a big one-time spike in state income tax collections for the current year. But even with that aside, I indicated, I think the increase right now is about 17.5, 18%. But even if you exclude that income tax revenue spike, we're still looking at close to 9% growth on the year. And a lot of that is driven by sales tax increases. And so if we continue on the current trend, we're looking at about a 2 billion surplus. And the legislative leadership has indicated that they're going to set aside 200 million of that for infrastructure projects. So to date, we've seen now 31 bills that would appropriate 295 million to infrastructure projects across the state. Now, of course, it's not really these standalone bills that are going to determine what gets funded. There will be a list of projects included in the budget when the budget is drafted. So there's the possibility that projects could be included that we haven't seen a bill for yet. But I think it's also true that if a bill for a project has moved pretty far through the legislative process, at the time that the budget bills are drafted, there's a good chance that they will be included. And I think as the budget outlook continues to improve, there's a good chance that they'll go well above that 200 million box that they've created for the infrastructure. And I think there is the potential, well, I know there's the potential for those numbers to grow. As I think many of you probably know, we just had enacted another round of COVID relief funding that provided roughly 12.3 billion to the state government. And just to put that in perspective, that's actually more than the entire annual state budget. And so there's a lot of restrictions and directions on how this funding is to be used. And so unlike the last round of relief funding, there's not funding going directly to ADOT or to highways and streets, but there is a tremendous amount that's going to other spending areas that compete with infrastructure funding, such as education, such as healthcare. And so that this new round of relief funding is going to basically alleviate pressure to put additional funding into the spending areas, potentially freeing up more for the infrastructure. Another big impact is that this funding is precluded from being used to support tax cuts. And so it can't be used to supplant funding that was already going to be dedicated or directed to state tax cuts. In other words, it couldn't be supplanted to do that. And so that's going to limit the ability to implement more tax cuts with this revenue. Now with that 2 billion base we were already seeing in the growth from the state revenues, yes, that could be directed to tax cuts. But this additional 1.23 billion cannot. And so that further, I think, increases the potential for funding to be directed to the infrastructure. And keep in mind, now that this relief funding has basically been enacted, the next agenda item back in Washington is an infrastructure package. So we could see another roughly 2 trillion, which is what they've been throwing out there as a number, get enacted that would provide another major revenue infusion here at the state, but would be focused on infrastructure. So, the point that I'm making is that while we don't know specifically how this additional revenue will make it to the state and sort of what the process is for getting it, or what the requirements or restrictions will be, I do think that there's a tremendous amount of potential for additional revenue to be directed our way. So I would be proactive and I would be prepared to have a plan for utilizing this funding if and when it becomes available. Now, the list that Vinny had brought forward to you, that was in response to an effort to address and be proactive with the process that the state legislature has used the last couple of years for utilizing surplus funding. Next year, we would like to be in a position to propose that they utilize that surplus funding for a list of what we consider to be statewide Greater Arizona regional priorities. And that's not to say that we couldn't potentially use it for other revenue sources if they were to become available, particularly at the federal level. But I think we're going to be prepared for state surplus next year. But the point that I want to leave you with is that with everything that's going on with the federal funding, as well as the potential for the state budget outlook to improve even more, I would be ready and prepared in the event that there are other opportunities for funding to get directed to the infrastructure. So, I know I've left you with probably a lot more questions than answers, but I do think it's important to be prepared for the likelihood that there will be quite a bit of funding opportunities made available for infrastructure investment in the very near future.
Kevin, just one question, and this is not so much for me as I'm asking for the entire executive board. What are the unfunded liabilities that we currently have in our transportation system? It equals a considerable amount of money.
It's based on ADOT's last long-range transportation plan, which they update every 5 years, and they're actually due to update it next year. They had anticipated that over the 25-year duration of that plan, there was going to be a 30.5 billion gap between anticipated revenue and needs, which comes out to about 1.2 billion a year every year in needs that are going unmet. And I'll also point out that that is just strictly on the state system and not on the local road networks.
So you can see that this is not a small problem, but it's a huge problem, is infrastructure funding.
Absolutely, and I'd also point out, the magnitude of this. It could really be a tremendous amount of funding, but it is also going to be one time in nature. I think that the federal government has at least learned their lesson from when they did the stimulus funding 12 years ago, and I don't think it's going to be directed all to shovel ready. I think that they will provide a more reasonable time frame, such as 4 years to utilize all of this funding. But I do think it's important to point out that it is one time in nature. And so you still have the problem like we've seen over the last 30 years where longer term, the revenues that are coming in will continue to not meet the needs on a longer term basis.
Kevin, member Good here. I agree with you as far as having some pre-prepared proposals to submit. That was one of the reasons why we got so much substantial funding from the FAA for our expansion of services and terminal, et cetera, at the airport, because we did have a well-crafted proposal ready to submit. And because funding was available, and we had a substantial proposal already prepared, we did get substantial funding and moved way up on the priority list. So I think it's well worth spending some time and getting some proposals on the table to be presented as soon as funding looks like it's likely to occur.
Very well put, Phil. And this board traditionally over the course of the last 8 years has tried to do that, is have things is put up money to at least do the planning and some of the upfront money and take care of that so that we can move forward with saying that we have this project that's ready to go. All we need to do is get the funding to build it. And that's where Highway 69 out in front of Frontier Village got on the agenda, was basically is that we paid for the money up front to get it done. And therefore it was ready to go when the money became available with the board.
Indeed. Thanks.
Any other comments? Anybody have any other questions for Kevin?
And if I could
I
just,
have a comment.
sorry.
That's okay. Hi, Kevin.
Hello.
When we were discussing when to meet or when RTAC, when the board will be meeting, I happen to just have the schedule, and it is every fourth Monday, I believe, at 1 o'clock. And this is the first one for John will be March 22nd, this coming up.
That's
So-
correct. That is a correction. I think we said it was the third Monday. It is the fourth Monday, John.
It's the fourth Monday.
Okay,
And it's virtual. It's at 1 o'clock, and I'll make sure you get emailed, or maybe Vinny can make sure we all get emailed. Because since it's virtual, you can all sit in. So it's quite interesting to talk about what's going on in the legislature.
yep,
Mayor, I'll get you on the distribution list quickly, but yeah, it is this Monday, and I'm hoping to get the agenda packet out, if not by end of business today, very early tomorrow. So yeah, that is a kind of a short notice for
You
you.
just want us to work all weekend.
okay. No problem.
No, and I did want to follow up on one other, just on Council Member Good's comments. As I indicated, I think that the opportunities are going to present themselves, and we don't know specifically the mechanics and how we're going to be able to address them. A lot of it's going to be based on, are we talking about pursuing state budget revenue, or is this federal funding that's coming in, and sort of how the mechanics of that are going to work. I will tell you that in Washington, particularly with the House, it does appear that they are going to go back to including earmarks in the federal appropriations process. And so if you have not already, I suspect that your House members are going to be contacting your jurisdictions individually to be asking for proposals for earmarks. I believe that each member is going to be getting an allocation so that they could have at least one project from their district in next year's appropriations bill. And I think they're due to have, they have to have that information in to the appropriations chairman within a couple of weeks. And so that will be moving fairly quickly. So again, I'd be ready for these requests because I think they're going to start coming fairly quickly.
Are you talking, Laura, are these going to be requests for projects that are local projects, or are they for ADOT projects where we are joined at the hip, shall we say?
I believe it's going to be that member's discretion. Now that the federal process, it does kind of lend itself more to those larger federal state projects. I think the criteria that are included includes the status of the NEPA process for that project, which is, typically, something that's, requesting federal aid. So I don't think local projects are precluded, but I do think the process is probably more inclined to support a larger state or regional project.
Okay. Well, that'd be something for us all to pay attention to. Our public works directors, I'm sure, are going to be challenged.
In a good way.
Yes.
I just want to thank you, Kevin, for giving us the update.
Oh, appreciate it. Hopefully be doing it in person soon.
Yes.
That would be.
We're out, Whiskey Row on St. Patty's Day. What more could you?
Yep.
Get that bottle of Jameson's out of there, Kevin. Okay, moving on to item number 12, consideration and possible action to approve the SR 69, SR 169 intersection alternative selection report. Has everybody had a chance to read this report from Kettleson?
I don't think so.
Yes,
I don't think
I
so.
did.
Yes.
Have you read it, John?
Yes.
Okay. Vinny, you want to tell us about it real quick? Is there anything new in here that we didn't already know?
Chairman Brad, I'll be doing the next two. No, so this alternative selection report was looking at changing that intersection to a roundabout. Obviously, that report was completed by Kittleson, and the TAC did approve it. And now today we're looking for final approval from the board.
I think if it was approved by the TAC, that's a good recommendation to move forward with it. So I'll make the motion to approve it.
I second that.
Seconded by John Hughes. Let's go ahead and do a roll call vote again.
Member Dickinson,
Yes,
Vice Chair Brown,
Yes.
Member Good,
Yes,
Member Hughes,
Yes.
Member Armstrong,
yes,
Member Knight.
Yes,
6 in favor, the motion passes.
Great, thank you. Okay, moving on to item number, I believe it's 13. There's some possible action, SR 89A at Robert Road Traffic Interchange Alternative Selection Report. Again, that's not one I've had a chance to read yet. Has anybody else read it? John?
Yes. And
Attack. That's not fair. You get this.
I know that's the way it works. Daniel's got a update on that one for everybody else too.
Go
Yes, so
ahead.
this report was completed by Kimley Horn. It's looking at moving the Robert Road intersection and about a mile east and making that into a full TI with entrance ramps and then reconfiguring to keep all the current movements and everything like that. There's a lot of different parts, and we started off with a full look at the project, and we ended up determining that it needed to be more of a phased approach due to cost. So the TAC did also recommend this one for approval. We'd be looking for final approval from the board today. If you have any other questions, I can answer those.
What's the actual, what's the cost on this project?
So the full cost, I think, was up around 27 million.
And that's for the alternative selection, right?
That'd be for the final, including all of the phases.
Well, I thought the estimate for that intersection was in the 30 million 10 years ago.
It was, and the alternative selection report came in around 27.
Daniel, this is for the Santa Fe Loop interchange, correct?
Correct, yes.
Well, I'm willing to accept the report, so I'll make a motion to approve the traffic interchange final alternative selection report.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Mr. Hughes. All in favor? Roll call.
Aye,
Member Dickinson,
yes,
Vice Chair Brown,
Yes.
Member Good,
Yes.
Member Hughes,
Yes.
Member Armstrong,
yes,
Member Knight,
Yes,
6 in favor, the motion passes.
Thank you. I just want to make a point on this report. This has not been one of our priorities because there's so much money involved with this action. And although it points out high due to some accidents and fatalities that have occurred at this intersection, those were as a result of not the intersection, but the driver itself. So anyway,
Like another accident.
somebody's celebrating already. So anyway, so with that, I'm gonna move for adjournment. Anybody want to stick around?
Chairman Brown,
Yes, sir.
a couple of things from the Transportation Board.
Did I miss you, Gary?
Yeah, well, no, I'm not on the agenda. I don't know why. But I just, some announcements.
Go ahead.
Transportation Board meeting is this Friday, of course. And on the consent agenda, it will be a virtual meeting. On the consent agenda, there are 3 items for Yavapai County. Or on the consent agenda, item 3.1, there's a bid award for Verde Valley or for Verde River Bridge. There were some PPAC project modifications. For PPAC, there were for an item in agenda item 6C, I-17 and milepost 311, pavement preservation, increase scope and budget $405,000. And 6I, SR 89 at milepost 338, increased budget $672,000. Both of those number 6 items were pavement preservation or pavement rehab. Also, the 5-year plan will go live on the State Transportation Board website tomorrow, the 18th, and it will be presented to the board as a tentative plan for consideration and public hearing to start tomorrow or Friday with that meeting.
And your instructions, the board's instructions pretty much are still the pavement preservation, correct?
Yeah, it pretty much, we have very little. Actually in this 5-year plan, there is some room. Actually, they've got some pay or some projects that deal with modernization and new structure, new infrastructure. But that's only in the first 3 years. The 2024, 2025 is all pavement preservation with a little bit of modernization.
Well, hopefully that'll change, but that, it all comes down to the money.
It all comes down to the money, and hopefully we'll get some input from staff on Friday as to how much of that money we're possibly going to see. It may be a little early yet, but it looks promising, as Kevin said. So we'll hope we get some, and the board's going to be pushing for more than pavement preservation if we've got the money to do it.
Well, we're pushing from the legislative standpoint from at least this county, and that we want more money dedicated to preservation as well as new construction. So,
oh, absolutely, absolutely.
We're growing too quick not to have new construction.
If I could add to that real quickly, and yes, we are hopeful that the additional funding coming in will add to the expansion as well as addressing all the maintenance needs. But with that last, with the last series of adjustments that the board made, Gary, I think you've got the I-17 expansion project back up to being fully funded based on the current cost estimates.
Exactly. I-17 is back, is back on. In fact, all of the programs that were dropped off because we didn't think we were going to have the money, they were dropped off because of COVID. ADOT's been able to bring back,
Oh, good.
and I was happy that they did it that way.
So
They
that
brought back the ones they dumped off.
those that we thought we were going to lose last year have been reinstated for this year.
Yes.
Okay.
So does that include that flex lane on 17, Gary?
Yes, it does.
Oh, we need that one.
Yes.
What, I think that was like 117 million, if I'm not mistaken, but I could be very easily be wrong.
The total
More
cost,
like 130, I think.
Is it?
the total cost of the project is 380 million. And I think with that last round, you added 40 million to get up to that. So yeah, it basically includes, from Anthem to Sunset Point, including the flex lanes.
Yeah, it was some 300 and some million for the whole thing.
However, don't take it from the MPOs.
No,
Hey,
they ain't got none to take.
I'll second that.
All right. Well, with that, we're in adjournment. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. And Vinny will get us out our agendas and information ahead of time, hopefully, and that way we'll get a chance to look it over real good before the next meeting. Thank you.